Hey, we're excited to be here. What a great topic. When we were conceptualizing this, we really started to think about where are we at with human connection in regards to AI. I know that I've been to several conferences, and probably many of you have, and we are pumped about tools, right? And I don't know about you, but I'm a self-proclaimed futurist, and love to still play with the technology that's out there. And I was in that first round with ChatGPT, so I was super excited about it. And then I had this moment, and I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but it reminded me of like welcoming a new coworker. Like you're super excited to invite this new coworker in, and then I started having some reservations about my new coworker, ChatGPT. Like self-admit, part of my presentation, almost every one of the images that I've had is DALL-E helped me create them, spot on. And by the way, I'll just put this out there. Before I'd say, no, that's not what I want. But for this presentation, I threw up the first image that it always gave me. So when you see those, if you're like, that doesn't look right, I did that on purpose, just to let you know. So I had reservations about this new coworker. And many of my colleagues in academic innovation, we would come in to work and go, did you see what this could do? It just designed student learning outcomes in seconds. And then we would come in the next day going, I really hate this. This is going to destroy our connection with our students. What are we going to do? And then we have faculty, that we're super excited. How do we use it? Tell us how to use it. And then we're getting like 1,000 reports, like our students are cheating. We're living the same story. So that's why I assume that's why you're here. We brought you together. So what do we do with this new coworker? How do we coexist? They're here. They're not going away. Sure, I appreciate the reference to robots. I've used that. We haven't even talked about robots yet, right? I mean, I always go back. Anybody seen that movie, Megan? Okay, look it up. Totally scary. Kid robot takes over, kills people. I mean, and it wasn't because it was evil. It was just because it was AI. Yeah, so you got to be careful about that. So I tried to figure out a clip. For me, I'm a very visual person, so I had to come up with a clip that kind of describes where I'm at today with AI. So if you don't mind, let me share this clip with you. Remember Rafi?
They look tired of hanging the balance. She almost there. Or my way, almost there.
Ready? Ovaltine. Ovaltine. Sorry, commercial. Ditch.
I'm not the face word again. Wise.
I'm out there to face the world again, wiser. Yeah. Well, I have a secret decoder ring there on your table for you. As a reminder, I think that we all have found ourselves in this situation where we try to decode the future, right? And I don't have an activity for the decoder ring. I'll leave that up to you. But if you want to wear it during the conference and send each other secret messages, do that. But I remember as a kid, playing around with that. So I really relate to Ralphie. But this whole AI stuff of do we think too much into the future? And again, it's really hard for me because I'm just wired to think towards the future. But I really want our focus and our time today to be really focused on the present. And what is it that we're dealing with right now? Because that in itself will lead us into the future. But let's take a minute and you can tell again, there's DALL-E giving me a college professor with a decoder ring. It's interesting concept. I mean, isn't it? I think we're going to have this whole new genre of art where we're going, what is AI thinking? You know? So if you find yourself staring, it's okay. So let's decode your past though a little bit. I want you to take a minute at your tables and I want you to share with each other, if you haven't introduced yourself, please do that. But share with each other, what is one of the most memorable moments that you have had in your education experience? All right, and with learning or whatever, maybe it was a professor, but also answer that why question. Why is that important to you as a first memory as you're going to share? All right, memorable moment in your learning. All right, let's take about 10 minutes to do that. Feel good. I know, I lie a lot. You'll figure this out. Sorry. I'm also like very crazy about keeping time, so you know, but Tony, give me a number between 1 and 10. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This table, share a story for me. Grab it quick.
I can talk loud. The story that I gave was back in high school. My government teacher kind of knew my political affiliation and made sure that every time we did an assignment or something, I was always supposed to take the opposite of that. And as a young man, I was trying to figure out why. You know, it's not what I wanted. But I learned so much about, there's so many other points of view, there's so many other things I need to be open to and experience, and that's what he's trying to do. And I still think about that a lot and throughout my academic career, professional career, of keeping that open mind and what else is out there, what else can I learn from that?
Good. Number?
7.
Oh, I should even count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Somebody from Felix table. Story. What's the best story at the table?
Oh,
You read all the stories, yeah. You've been volatile.
Can you guys hear me out there? Good, Chris? Well, I actually had 2 stories. Bored them to death. So the first one was when I was learning English back in Brazil, 5th grade. The way that they taught us was like the regular verbs. We had like a long list of all the verbs in English, the regular ones. And we had to memorize the row and the column, present, past, and past. To go went, gone. To be was, where, been. And that's how we had to learn how to speak the verbs in English. So that was a bad example. What I still remember.
I was trying to see where you're going with that. So
That was a bad one.
Okay.
And then the good one was fast forward 25 years later when I was working my master's here at Embry-Riddle. The first class was education technology, computer-based instruction. And the first day that the professor said was, you know what the definition of education is, and none of us could say. And he said, it's change of behavior. So that was blew our mind. And then the course itself was engaging because it was very hands-on. We had to really build a computer-based instruction. And none of us, 15 of us, none had actually done anything that was so hands-on. And that was back in 2010. And we didn't have the technology that we have today. We had something, but nothing that compares to what we have. We didn't have Yellowdig then.
that's good.
That was a good one.
Great. Good. Good compare and contrast. A number? One more.
5.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Brian's table. Give us someone. And not an Embry-Riddle person either. We only have one, but that's okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Morris. My story actually was middle school. In middle school, I was 13. That's just a terrible time. And my family was having a lot of trouble. And so I was actually out of school more than I was in school. I skipped all the classes. And my failing grades actually caught me attention like the vice principal there. And she brought me into her office, and of course, you're going to the vice principal's office. And she said, instead of saying, you have to go to class, here's what's going to happen, you have to go to class. She said, what's going on? And she asked me what was happening in my life and why it was so hard for me to feel in class. And from there, she actually rearranged my entire curriculum so that I would be comfortable staying in the class. And I went to like half days for like all of seventh grade, and it was pretty impressive. And she told me a lot of things about education in those moments that changed my mind about how teaching happens, how learning happens, and that went on to become like my whole career. So it's really impressive.
Good, great. Wow, we didn't plan that, but hello, do you see the common theme there, that human connection? Someone connected in your life, right? And that happens. Now, obviously, our theme here is we're grappling with this issue of AI. I mean, is it that view of the Jetsons of a robot teaching us in front of the class? Is that where we're headed with all this AI stuff? Will we be so self-directed learning? We don't need faculty anymore because AI will be smarter than all of us and it's just going to teach us everything we know. Where AI has all the knowledge, so all we need to do is hit a button. I mean, all these visions of the future. So right now, as I see it, a lot of our mindset is kind of grappling with this idea, like some kind of competitive nature between nostalgic teaching versus AI. Or is it? I mean, and one of the challenges I have for us is let's revisit, again, in this present moment, let's revisit and say, what can we take away that comes from the past that's going to carry us into the future? Because you got to look past to go forward, right? So on our to-do list here for the next couple of minutes is I do want to take a look back and again, throw some challenge questions out to you. Is AI changing our lives and our values and really our fundamental way of being? Is it? I don't know. Is being in the age of AI, how do we find new ways to express our humanity and coexist with AI? And lastly, look at some practical ways. I call them vintage innovations or retro tools. Is what are some very specific things? And you're like, I love it. Some of you, and I think Felix might have already mentioned it. Some of it's going to be like, oh, I already do that. If I'm a faculty member, I'm cool. I'm already doing it. I'm vintage, but I'm cool, right? So you're going to ask yourself, is vintage innovations, can it work? Can it work? How many here are with online parts of the house of higher education? Okay, or it looks like we're about half and half, right? So these lessons and these ideas that we share together through our table talks and our time together are really important because there are some principles that transcend everything. So we got to understand, though, that we have always had a problem with blaming technology for our woes, right? So ever since the dawn of television, people used to say that's the opium of the people, right? I can remember my parents limiting my TV watching as a kid, like, okay, we're only going to watch 2 hours. While I stayed up and watched Dallas and Three's Company. So, you know, that kind of thing always went on. I love that picture again, AI, look what they captured. Oh, isn't that great? The family sitting around watching a show together. Sorry, I got to take this apart. I mean, how often does that happen in our households anymore? Everybody's on their devices and the TV is on and nobody's really watching the show. I just throw that. So yeah, so we've always blamed technology for maybe some of our societal woes. It doesn't stop there. If you go back to the 16th century, when the newspaper started showing up on the scene, people and skeptics were all over the place because they thought it was going to reduce social gatherings in that respect. Go back even further, is Socrates and many of the philosophers at the time said, I don't want to write anything down, right? Because it will atrophy my memory. I'm not writing anything down. Crazy technology, right? And so here we are in the age of AI. And again, our time together is not to be, yeah, this is one of these conferences where we're going to throw AI under the bus. No, all right? Because we have to coexist. So we need to figure out ways that can actually happen. Another, thinking back, do you remember seeing this meme probably about 10 years ago? It's a picture of a New York subway coming into town, and it says, all this technology is making us antisocial. So for me, that was like back in the day, I was going around kind of teaching teachers and faculty how to use mobile devices in your classroom. Kind of regret that a little bit now. But we were talking about using iPads and all that kind of stuff. And so I loved this meme at the time going, yeah, stick it to them, all those people that hate technology, right? Because we've always had connection problems anyway. Older me started looking at this image, this last week, and I'm like, that's probably not the best example that I could come with. Why? Because back then, when you were reading a newspaper, when you got done with it, you put it down, you put it away, You probably turn to the person next to you on the train and was like, did you read that story? Did you see what happened? Did you catch the game that night before? Or you read an editorial and you're like, I don't agree with this author's opinion. Or I agree or I see it differently. That paper didn't go in your pocket, right? The paper didn't go in your pocket for you to pull out a minute later and check and go back in your pocket and pull it out later and check. Here we are at a Human Connection Summit. If everybody freeze what you're doing, stop. If your phone is in your hand, self-identify. I caught you. No. If you're on your computer and you're answering email, I won't ask. All right. You get the point. We listen, folks, we're here a day and a half, and we can't even turn this thing over for a couple minutes. I get a little preachy. I'm not trying to be preachy here. All right. But in a recent, some of us were talking at dinner last night. Simon Sinek has a really good video that's floating around the internet talking about when you're just carrying this thing around, what message does that send, right? So if I'm talking to Shanik, how does he feel? If I'm talking to him, I'm like, yeah, Shanik, like, please give me some connection here. Even at a dinner table, and again, we all do this. I'm just self-identifying here. What message does that send to our family and friends when this is sitting right here beside us and we're having dinner, having great conversations, and then right in the middle we go, yeah, just a minute, right? So it's all around us. And so when we define AI, we can't just be picky about Gen AI, because AI has been around us for a very, very long time. So we have to think through a little bit more of how this has affected our lives, how it's affected our students' lives. When I look at our audience, I think another thing that we're going to have to grapple with over the next couple of days, and part of the reason why we want to do this is at Embry-Riddle, we want your solutions as well. We're all about cheating. I mean, taking other people's ideas. No, we want that because we face the same issues. So whether it's an issue with your team that you oversee, how do you connect better with your team coming out of the pandemic? That's been a challenge for us, right? How do you better connect with your faculty? We have faculty here. Faculty, how do you connect better with your online operations? Through human connection. And when we talk about human connection, we will define it. It doesn't mean that it has to happen in this face-to-face. It can happen virtually. So we're not throwing technology and virtual under the bus. So when we talk about being in the age of AI, one of the things that we want to talk about is we have to have that understanding that things are happening much faster at a rate that we can't comprehend. Thomas Friedman had said this a long time ago. And just to give you a perspective, about 12 to 14 years ago, we had about a 1 out of 4 adoption rate with these smartphones, right? So 1 out of 4 Americans about 14 years ago had a smartphone, right? Today, we have about a 95% adoption rate in teens only. All right, I won't ask, but if you have an elementary student at your home, there's probably a good chance that your elementary student now is carrying a device, right? So if you put that in perspective, it really only took 4 years to reach at least 25% adoption with smartphones, right? So the personal computer, it took 17 years to reach 25% of the American population, right? Let's fast forward, ChatGPT. In the first 5 days, they had registered over 1 million users. Do you remember, again, a little bit over a year ago, when we were looking at that, like some people were trying to log in because people like me at work were like, folks, you need to sign up for that. And they're like, we can't, right? Because 1 million people in 5 days. AI growth is expected to grow over 38% over time. I mean, this is just, it's on a train and it's moving fast. So how do we adapt, right? What does it mean to be being? So we do have this solid history of slamming technology, right? I often think of what kind of the Back to the Future scenario. So if kind of the Marty McFly style, like what if somebody from the 1950s showed up here in our modern day? What would they experience, right? And I think they might be just a little disappointed, because Back to the Future, remember, and if you've ever read any of the future materials from the 50s, by now we were supposed to have flying cars, robot maids and human, right? Let's just again take a quick minute. And again, I hope this is not intended to bash tech. I'm a tech guy all the way, right? We design tech and tech in turn designs us. So take for example, and we have great ed tech partners in the room with Yellowdig and others, but you could tell how intentional they were about solving the problems. I don't feel the same way always with all companies because let's just take social media for example. It's like, this is going to be a great thing. Did we ever kind of consider the ramification and consequences that we live with in our society today when that came about? I mean, I used to go to senior citizen like centers and train them on how to use Facebook. And I'm regretting that now because I got on Facebook when my mom got on. I don't know if you got all experienced that, but that's just one of many stories. So, tech, you build the tech and then hope for good outcomes. We've done that. And here we are, many of us in this room are now half machine, half human. And when I think about how we've got there, my lifetime, I just too reflective. I was thinking this morning, I'm a Generation X. And I'm like, you know what? I'm the last generation to know what it's like to live without the internet. Let that sink in for just a second. My gosh, my parents would like, go outside. Do what? I don't know, go find something to do. I'll see you at 8 o'clock tonight or when it gets dark. I'm like, really? Think about that for just a second. So we had the internet. We had the Internet of Things. We all talk about that a lot. But now have you really thought about that we are the you of things? We have our watches. We have our devices on us all the time, telling us when to even drink water. I love it. That fits so well. When I go home, I don't even have to turn a light switch on. Alexa, turn on the lights, right? Tell my TV, I don't even have to click a button anymore, right? We are becoming our own smart TV when you think about this. Tech is designing us. Whether good or bad, that's not the case. So again, a problem that we're going to grapple with learning is, do we find a balance? Do we, do we shun some of this and just say, no, it needs to be all old school? Or do you find the balance and blend that happens? And that's a bit of the journey that we're on here at Embry-Riddle. We work, most of my team here that's here, we work for the worldwide division. We have over 20,000 students around the world that we serve, and faculty that are dispersed all across the globe. And one of the main priorities that we have is a focus on humanizing online learning, because we've recognized very early on, you can be really, really good at building the best Canvas courses. You can do a lot of great things on the digital side of the house. But ultimately, did our faculty connect with that person on the other side of that screen? It's always been a worthy goal in online education, but to be frank and honest with you, it doesn't get achieved as much as what we'd like. And so this is the charge that we're after. And it started in a couple number of ways that we're trying to be very intentional about this. First one is that when I put up there leveraging ed tech, as we adopt technology to use with our students, our focus, if we're going to think of it in terms of a continuum, our focus is not thinking, ooh, how do we automate this? Versus, does this take us closer to human connection? That's why Yellowdig is a partner, right? We want to be moving in the direction to make higher, more authentic connections with our students. So when a company comes to us and says, you know what? We can modernize all these processes for you. Your students. It's going to free your. This is usually the one. It's going to free your faculty up. I'm not trying to throw third-party vendors under the bus, but we've had students complain like, okay, we're using Alex Math or something like that, and they're like, I didn't even get a chance to talk to my professor. What? Because the third party did everything. So talking about a pendulum swing, that's a big push of what we do. Our R&D is most of our priorities in our academic innovation team is centered around either connecting with our faculty or finding ways that we support faculty in that human connection piece, because we believe that's where it's at. At Embry-Riddle, all of our faculty have to be certified to teach for us online. That includes both our adjunct population as well as our full-time people. So every year they have to work through about an 8 to 10 hour refresher course. And Angie, wave your hand. Oh, okay. I heard him complain. They say 8. Right. Yeah. But we get good responses out of that. But our focus and theme of that refresh course is connected to human connection or humanizing the online experience. I told Angie I was going to put her on the spot with this one too, but we really focus in on what and it's out there in the literature, but it's called the 5 C's of connection. You want to share what those 5 C's are real quick? And you'll probably talk later in the panel about it as well.
Yes, it's used in everything. It's a basic refresher. But the 5 C's include connection, compassion, community, content, and consistency.
You nailed it.
We've been talking about it constantly for years.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So that's our pursuit. And that's just one of the many ways here at Embry-Riddle that we stay grounded in a digital world to provide kind of an analog view of what we do. And, I'm going to extend it as part of our conversations over the next day or so is how many here you have a department that you lead? Okay. Look at the leadership in this room. That's awesome. But, if we're going to throw it out, we might as well talk about it. Have you had a connection problem? Have you have a retention problem with your staff? And not that it's related to human connection, but I don't know about you, but coming out of the pandemic, we had people that did not want to come back to the office. We had people in the office sitting right next door to each other on a Teams call. That's probably of last week. We're working on that, right? Whatever happened to when I want to schedule a meeting with Deb, that I go to Deb's office and I sit down and talk. There's something about being present in that moment. And that's how we define human connection. Human connection is not some vague term. Because when we say, oh, we should build relationships, to me, that's very vague, right? Human connection is that point of contact, and that does happen online where you connect with another individual, all right? It works really well when we're face to face, but it also can work very well in environments where you can connect and students feel heard, they feel seen, and they feel understood. That's a very important part of the work I think that we do every day. So how do we make this all come together? This is why I call this retro tools or vintage innovations. If you've ever visited ballparks across America, any baseball fans in the room? Right. Yeah. So I might hack this up a little bit because I'm a quasi baseball fan. Cleveland Guardians. Well, that's another story. I shouldn't go down that road. Cleveland Guardians, right? Progressive Field. But when you think about vintage innovations, it's a lot like what we've seen in a lot of the baseball parks. You have parks that have this very rich history, nostalgia. But in those parks, they've created these modern amenities. And so you can hook up to the Wi-Fi. There's interactive scoreboards. There's VR going on. There's all these things. But they were able to blend the environment and use both vintage ways of doing things to create it. Now, you do have spectrum of baseball parks. I believe like out in San Francisco at the Giants Park. I mean, that is definitely high tech, right? But you can go to Wrigley Field, and if you were a kid growing up in Chicago going to Wrigley Field, it still has that same vibe, but it's got a good blend of modernism that goes with it. So how do we unpack that in education? If you remember several years ago, this was a very popular term, skeuomorphism, and Apple was like the one doing this. Does anybody, before I tell you what it is, let me know what that term means? Rachel? Yeah. Yeah, taking digital, but making it connect to what the real world was, right? Why we have the recycle bin on all our computers. And again, I'm a Mac guy, but it's kind of funny that when I log into this PC, I'm like, the recycle bin is still there, right? So, especially with the mobile device era, why in the world did they go to all the trouble to make a digital book turn a page? You didn't need to do that. Why are there lines on the notepad, right? They finally got rid of that. But the designers behind that said people are always going to have trouble making that jump with the digital technology and so on. So, for us in education, I think that we've experienced the same thing in some regards. So I'll give you the one famous example. Is how many here love discussion boards? Okay, tough crowd. By the way, we just had 600,000 bikers here in Daytona last week. You guys are right up there with them. So, anyways, so think about this, discussion boards. Somebody's brain, sorry if you're in the room with this, I don't know whoever the creator of some of these learning management systems are, but discussion boards. So they said, oh, you know what, we have great discussions in class. When we take them online, let's throw a question out and have students do this. And we hear crickets, right? So now we have great companies like Yellowdig and others that said, you know what, you need to really rethink about this whole environment if you want to create an interaction in courses. That's again a journey that we've been on. And it's not so much about the tool, it's how you deliver that and what kind of methodology that you use. So vintage innovations. I have unfortunately been labeled the Chick-fil-A guy. I was at WCET this past year, and somebody said, hey, you're the Chick-fil-A guy. And I'm like, what? And I said, how do you know I go there a lot? And they were like, no. They said, I heard you talk. And so I got to share my Chick-fil-A story because it's really relevant to the work today. Because we're not the only industry that grapples with this. So if you remember during the pandemic, Chick-fil-A made a really bold move. And sorry for those of you that are especially far up north, you might not have our wonderful presence of Chick-fil-A's in every corner, so you might not be speaking your language. But Chick-fil-A did a very bold move in the day of automation. They moved people outside. Why? Good question. I'll answer it. Right? One of their core values is that connection piece. And they realize that you can get through a Chick-fil-A drive-through at a much faster rate by having your people on the outside. You're greeted with a human, right? And if you ever, by the way, we've got plenty of Chick-fil-A's here around Daytona if you want to visit it. But check it out, study them. I don't get any sponsorship from them. I would love to someday. But it's a fascinating story. I mean, they close the drive-through window. They have multiple choice ways that you can order. All these things that create a connection point where you are actually working with a human versus what most fast food industries are working towards today is full-fledged automation. I was in a city in Ohio not long ago, and they had a fully automated drive-through at McDonald's. I just wanted to pull up and throw $5 in there and say, just give me something, because I know whatever you give me is going to be wrong. Just want to tell them that. But I didn't do that, right? Because automation always is not the best answer. And I think this is what we grapple with today and in higher education is this idea of that. So I'm running short on time, so I'm going to give the very high level view of some things that I believe that we can have some discussions about over the next several days. First of all, is moving quickly to some vintage innovations that are very practical, that all of us can put into our courses, that we can advocate for with our teams, to take back to our universities. And some of these are ones that you say, oh, we already do that. We're on the right track. So real quickly, convergent versus divergent thinking. I asked DALL-E again, hey, give me an illustration. Isn't this kind of cool? So convergent thinking is this whole idea that you're very linear, analytical. You take students from point A to point B. Whatever happened to more divergent thinking? So instead of answering the question why, but you go to why not, right? That's divergent thinking. Very hard. If you ever taught courses and you've tried to pull that, extrapolate from students, that's a hard place to be. But that's a place as a way to, I don't want to say again, combat AI, but AI is not going to help you with divergent thinking. All right. Reclaim curiosity. I love this quote again. It's always been passed around. Is how do we get curiosity back at the center point of our course? And AI can help along that journey, right? It gets you started. One of my favorite things about this whole AI generation that's going on is I believe it is making smarter people smarter at a faster rate than we think it's making dumber people dumber. I don't know if that's appropriate, but I'll say it. Right? Think about that for a second. Have you had this conversation with like really smart people? They come to the office and like, you would not believe what I programmed in ChatGPT last night. So you have programmers that were kind of decent programmers now that are rock stars because of this. We have emerging writers that were stuck on a topic. Like our writing center is actually advocating for the use of AI in the writing center because get unstuck with AI and then validate your writing. Right? That's really cool. If you're a creative, let AI get started for you. We have a huge instructional design team here at Embry-Riddle, And so we're exploring right now, why do we need to spend weeks creating like the right language for a student learning outcome when we can get it in seconds and then we adapt it to what it needs to be? All right, it's pretty impressive. So how do you creatively use it? For all of our humanities folks in the room, and Shaunik already mentioned this one, is let's get focused back on philosophy. I really never thought that was going to come out of there now, but it did. Because I've been at other institutions where I've had to sunset the philosophy programs. I love this idea that reasoning needs to be at the heart of every subject matter we do, not philosophy as its own subject, but bringing reasoning back in everything we do with our students, because that's the basis of how we survive man versus machine and answer some of those bigger questions. And then lastly is, in a distracted world, our students need deep work. Again, I think pulling from the past, vintage innovations, we're so about, let's keep moving, and I'll self-identify in online learning. Okay, we've got 8 weeks, we've got 9 weeks, we have universities that are doing 7-week courses, we do intensive courses. And so here, especially in the United States of America, we go about this deep with subjects, right? How about we learn to slow down and focus on deep work? All right, I bet all of you know when you are in deep work on the work that you do every day, right? You get into a zone, you're focused on the task. Did you ever ask yourself how and why that happens? So more is not always better. And one of the things at Embry-Riddle I'm really appreciative of, we have some of our college faculty here today. And some of the work that we've been doing at Embry-Riddle is looking at not just quantity of learning outcomes, but the quality. So let's reduce. We don't need 20 learning outcomes in a course. We don't have to say, okay, cover. How about we get down to 5 or 6? Let's get manageable. Let's chunk that information so we can go deeper with subjects. That's another way that I see that we coexist with AI into the future. So that's kind of the fast track version of where we're at, looking back, being in the age of AI and vintage innovations. In our next segment, we're going to take a break here, but in our next segment, we're going to grapple with this. Now you're going to be like, what's our task? I'll get to that here in just a minute. But I really want you to walk away, at least from this segment, thinking about, wow, I hopefully have more questions than you have answers. And that's where we're going to start our next segment. So thank you for being a good listening audience. Thank you for being human. I've seen a lot of people put their phones down. So Chris, you got any directions for our break time?
Sure, we're going to take about a 15-minute break, come back in at 10:30, and then we'll get started on the next sessions. So please, bathrooms, there are bathrooms there, anything you want.
Let's do a quick clarification.
Yeah.
I'm always when you get up and speak, you always ask yourself, what do the listeners hear? And if we had time, I would reflect with you on that. But one of the things out of the gate I wanted to clarify as we begin this journey and kind of grapple with this bigger issue of human connection is definitely I'm not advocating to going back to the good old days, okay? So for example, when I'm making light of using your cell phones, I use my cell phone at every conference. I'm taking notes like this, right? Taking pictures of the slides. I mean, that's all cool stuff. Yeah, that's great. So it's never like, go back to the good old days, make everybody write on paper. No, that's not the mission of our time together. And obviously that's probably not the mission of what we think higher education is. But to kick us off, I really want to keep us focused on how do we blend? And I keep using that word coexist. It's not my favorite word, but I see that in our moment. Remember, we're not trying to project future predictions. We're not making predictions. We're looking back to look forward to say, how can we move forward with AI in this time? And relying upon some of those vintage tools, vintage strategies, making them fit in our environments is where we're going to be. So the next session that we're going to be jumping into is called question storming. For many of us, we've probably sat through brainstorming sessions before. And I don't know about you, I'm an idea person. So I'm kind of like vomit ideas. They just come out. About 90% of them are just terrible, but they come out. I'm fine with that. And then there's other people there that sit there and have to listen to guys like me. And they have that one good idea, but they're unwilling to share it because they're afraid that one idea is going to get shot down, right? That's why I've moved away from brainstorming to question storming. So question storming is a simple strategy for us to generate questions around an idea, around a big idea or a challenge, and go from there. The question doesn't, there's no right or wrong with asking a question. And you know that phrase, you can ask a stupid question. I guess you can, but I don't think that's going to happen in our group. So what is question storming here? There's a couple best practices I want you to put in play. First of all, there is no bad question. So at this point in the game, put them out there, right? Do questions in real time during your session. So take time if you see duplication at your table to say, oh, these two go together. Let's merge those questions, right? We'll get to a point where we're defining the priorities, because what we're doing in this is really going to guide us throughout this time together. It's kind of fun because when we were planning this conference and some of the other speakers, they keep saying, well, where are we headed? I'm like, I don't know. This is going to be self-generated from you. We are living into, if you're a design thinker, you will love this. If you are I need an outline with subpoints and metrics to follow, you're going to be challenged because we want you to put on that divergent thinking cap and jump in. So ask as many questions as possible. Probably the most, if you ignore all of my rules, don't ignore this last one right there, is do not stop and answer, judge, or discuss questions. All right, there will be a time for that. Sean will be leading us in the dialogue aspect, and some of my staff, we were out at an EDUCAUSE event with AI, and maybe some of you were out there, and I'm trying to remember the speaker's name. I was going to call her Dr. B from UC Berkeley. But she had a very interesting challenge for all of us in that audience, is around these conversations with AI. We're already starting down the wrong path in regards to how we make the priorities. And she gave 3 very simple methodologies for us to consider. And I think this is what we need to adopt as we move into the next section of having dialogues and creating what we will do tomorrow is actually strategic doing. Like, what do we have that we can begin some of this now? So the 3 that she said that we should really focus in on is very linear. You know, and I've heard this in your prioritization. What are the values? Go back to Chick-fil-A. You know, just because the world's jumping on AI, if that does not fit with the values of what you're doing, you might need to do something different. That doesn't mean you ban or shun. It just means, what are your values? Human connection. I got a feeling you're here at this summit with us because human connection is something you value. I'm just making that jump. All right. So what are your values? That should drive. The second one is the behaviors. You know, what behaviors are expected of your staff, of your students? That's jumping into some of those ethical questions. Just because we have it, should we use it? So that's a really good question to grapple with, right? Or if we do use it, what kind of behaviors do we expect now out of our faculty? And what kind of expectations of behaviors? So values, behaviors. And then the very final one is the one, this is where we've made the mistake, and I include myself in this is the services aspect. We've seen the shiny new tool and we jumped on board and we're like, wow, it can do this, it can do that, will it? You know, many of us that are explorer types of personalities, we love this one. Let's service this sucker. Let's maximize it. Let's train it. Let's tame it, right? Maybe we need to go back a couple steps. And so I hope that part of our continued conversation is really, what do you value? And then there's some of the priorities I've heard, forget which one they came from. I think it's up here, Sarah's group. We also have to question, you know, do students want human connection? I mean, that's a really fair question, especially for adult learners. Get in, I want to do my stuff. I don't need a buddy, right? But authentic learning, if we go back to all the things that we know about learning, learning is social. We connect with learning. We make memories through stories, et cetera, et cetera. We have to question those things. So this is what we're grappling with over our next sessions together. So excellent. You passed design thinking with an A+ for all you performers in the room.